The Wunda Chair is an amazing piece of Pilates equipment to have at home, as it's small compared to the Reformer or the Cadillac, but it still offers the resistance of the springs. And bonus, it doubles as an actual chair. In fact, my husband uses mine as his desk chair in our tiny home on wheels. But it's really important to know how to be safe on the Wunda Chair. Just like any other Pilates apparatus with springs, if you don't know what you're doing, there's a potential for getting hurt. That's what this video is all about. So let's start by talking about the springs. To safely change the springs, you want to come around to the back side of your chair and then use one hand to hold the pedal to make sure it doesn't drop. Then the other hand's going to reach into your spring. You're going to rotate it to the side to slip it off. And that's why you're holding with your other hands, because at some point you could have no springs attached. So if that slipped out of your hand, the pedal goes crashing down and you don't want to hurt your Wunda Chair. Same thing when you're putting it back on. Make sure you've got a hand on the pedal. You start by turning it sideways. Once it's hooked in, rotate it so that it hangs down. And then always give it a little test. Push on your pedal, make sure it's properly connected before you start your exercise. Then it's important to understand your spring settings. There are set spring settings for exercises, and then there's room for a teacher to also decide, well, I think I could challenge this person a little more by adding a little more weight or taking away a little weight from the springs. But I would recommend that you stick to the ideal springs first and only change up your springs under the guidance of a teacher. In general, if we're using our feet on the pedal, so our legs are working, we do a heavier setting. So we'll put one spring on the top and one on the bottom. It doesn't matter which side they're on. One top, one bottom is the general setting for legs. If you have your hands on the pedal, so the arms are what's pushing on the springs, the general setting for that will be one middle spring. Again, it doesn't matter which side, it's going to be the same from either side. So how this works is it's going to be heavier when you're using the top and it gets lighter as you go down. So the heaviest possible setting you could have would be 2 springs on top. That would mean it's really hard to move that pedal. Then as you go down, it gets a little bit less, right? So the next one would be one top, one middle. The next, one top, one bottom. And then we keep lowering them down to get lighter. So the other side could come down all the way to the bottom, right? Once you go to using one spring, that's more of the arms, remember? Again, the lower you go, the lighter it gets. So that would be heavier than this one, and this would be the absolute lightest setting you could do. But now, some people think that heavier means you're working harder and you're stronger. That's not always the case in Pilates with these springs. In fact, sometimes to challenge a client, a teacher might give you lower springs than the ideal setting. So as I said before, stick to the ideal settings of the exercise first and wait for a teacher's guidance before you start messing around with trying different spring settings. It's also good to be able to recognize when a spring is getting too old. So the way to test for that is to stretch it and to take a look at the coils. The spaces between each coil when you stretch it should be the same. If you see a place where the spaces between the coils are bigger, that's a weakness right there. That means that part could snap when you pull on it. That's when it's time to replace your springs and get new ones. When you get off your Wunda Chair, you want to make sure that there's no more tension left on your springs. Remember, when we're using our feet on the pedal, the springs are going to be heavier. So particularly with the feet on the pedal, you want to make sure you dismount carefully. So whichever exercise you're doing, you want to make sure the pedal comes all the way up to the top till there's no more resistance on that spring before you take your foot off. If you're doing an exercise like the pull-up, where you finish with your feet down at the bottom, so there's tension on the spring, you step one foot off, and then you resist the spring back up with the other foot. Take your foot off first, and then take your hands off. It's so easy in an exercise like this. It's hard, and so you're tired, and you just want to kind of flop at the end of the exercise. Well, you should never be flopping off in Pilates. It's not very good. It's not how we do Pilates, but I understand that it happens sometimes when you're just like, oh, this was so tiring and I just want to get off. But it could be so dangerous because if you release your hands and aren't ready for that spring, it's a heavy spring and it will send you flying. If you're in a studio and you have a good teacher, they will likely have their foot on that pedal until you truly understand how to dismount from your Wunda Chair safely. So watch the pull-up dismount again. You step one foot off, resist the spring up all the way to the top with the other leg. Take your foot off first, then take your hands off. Now, if you're working on a slippery floor, there are some exercises where the Wunda Chair might want to slide out from underneath you, especially the ones where you're not just pushing down into the pedal, you're reaching long into the pedal. It's kind of like you're pushing the chair away. So you want to make sure that your chair is secure for those exercises. You can always slide your chair up against a wall so it really can't go anywhere. Or you can use sticky pads, place them underneath the chair and they won't go anywhere. Or if you don't have these, you could also use just like a roll-up mat. My final piece of advice is to not solely rely on videos to learn the Wunda Chair exercises, or any of the Pilates equipment for that matter. Understanding your body and how to use the equipment in your favor is best under a trained eye. It doesn't mean you have to take private lessons for the rest of your life, but getting that one-on-one feedback from time to time will make a huge difference. If you're interested in my online offerings, check out pilateswithmela.com. Whether you're interested in taking a one-off virtual session or joining the Contrology Hub, an online monthly membership community where I offer personal feedback in-app in the progression zone, and virtual one-on-one sessions in the mastery zone, built into an affordable monthly rate. There's something for everyone. And if you're curious about where to buy new or used classical Pilates equipment, head over to my resources page. I'll leave the link for both below in the description. And lastly, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. I'll see you next time.